All right. Yay. We are live. Alena, I'm so happy to be here with you today. So for those of us joining, welcome. Say hello. Tell us where you're from. Write in the comments. Hopefully, with technology, you never know, but I think we're going to be able to see all your comments. So you can let us know where you're from, what questions that you have. So we're really happy that you're here. We're excited to chat about how to create better work-life integration for your employees. This is such an important topic. So we're definitely excited. We've been chatting over the past couple of days about what we're going to talk about. And before we jump in, I definitely we're going to introduce ourselves. We're actually going to introduce each other. And I want to introduce this amazing woman. She's my co-creator of our new employee development program. It's called W Squared Work and Wellness Amplified. So I'm very, very pleased to introduce you to Alena Svidorskaya. Alena is a leadership coach and speaker and a facilitator, and she holds a degree in psychology from McGill University. She's a graduate from the coaching program of Coaching You, and she's a creator of a very successful Empower to Lead program. She draws from her 10 plus corporate careers. Organizations become better places to work by turning managers into leaders and tapping into innate employee strengths to create a culture of passion and full engagement. And I love that piece about turning managers into leaders. I've personally seen the difference between the two. There is a difference. I'm sure we've all had people who are managers only and not really leaders, and we didn't necessarily benefit from that. So that's so great that she does that. And as you'll see, we are all about the work and the personal. And so I've got some fun facts to share about Alena. She loves to travel. Me too. She's an amateur salsa and bachata dancer, and she is a self-proclaimed foodie.
Oh, thank you so much, Lydia. I'm really, really happy to be here. And now I get to introduce you. So Lydia DiFrancesco is a wellness expert, speaker, and author who has worked in the wellness industry for over 10 years. So in addition to having an MBA from the University of Ottawa, she's currently in progress to become a certified workplace health and performance practitioner. Lydia is a weekly radio host of a wellness segment and is a regular TV guest expert. Lydia has an energy, as you can see clearly, energy, and she has a passion for helping people see that there are simple ways to make healthy living your lifestyle. She has a knack for breaking down concepts into easy, actionable steps that you feel confident implementing right away. And you can definitely see that shine through everything that Lydia does. And of course, as you will probably want to know some fun facts about Lydia, she loves to knit and crochet. I was really surprised by that, but she does. She was on the salsa performance team where I am still an amateur. She blew way past that.
Very much amateur, very much amateur.
And she has a small jungle in her house of over 80 plants, which I am super impressed by. Nothing can live in my house, so I'm really impressed by that. And on the personal note, I'm really thankful for having met you from our very first conversation. It was so clear that we share so much in common, and I am beyond excited to work with you, to collaborate with you, because I know we're gonna do many great things together and help our clients along the way.
Yes, amazing. And I just noticed for some reason I can't post comments to LinkedIn, but I can absolutely still see them. So please feel free, again, just as a reminder, to if you have any comments, if you have any questions, write them in the chat. If it's something that we can't address, we will absolutely get back to you in the comments or privately. Yeah, I am so excited too, Alena. It's been so great to work together on creating this program. So I can't wait to see how we help employees and how we help companies, and again for our discussion today. So Alena, why are we talking about work-life integration today? Why this topic now? I mean, obviously there have been a lot of changes with the way we work in the past 2 years, like of course. There's some of the key changes that have made this concept of work-life integration even more important now than a few years ago.
Yeah. So like you said, so there's no denying that the last 2 years have been really unique, right? So we weren't ready for it. And even though we went through it together, we had very different experiences of it, right? there often is a comparison of the ocean, and we're all in the same boat. Well, we may have been in the same ocean, but we were definitely in different boats. We all had different experience through that the last 2 years. But regardless of how we felt about it, I think we can all agree that it was a life-changing experience, right? So the world is a very different place now. The way we communicate changed. Digital communication skyrocketed. So now this is one of the most obvious ones. We connect at work. Sometimes we were forced to connect at work, but also even with our family members, with our friends. And as a result, the spontaneous and informal communication declined, because it's much harder to be spontaneous over Zoom. It's much harder to share personal stuff and email. And actually, many of my clients said to me that even their relationship with their managers have become more formal as a result of that. And the way we work changed in general, right? Maybe for some people it's changed in where you work from, how you spend your time at work. Meetings doubled in the last 2 years.
At
There
least.
at least, and you know how we all love meetings, right?
Yeah.
And there's just many changes to that, and directions of the company and all of that. And inevitably, as we were going through that mass experiment, our attitudes toward life and work started shifting as well, right? Because pandemic, in a way, if you think about it, it was kind of a magnifying glass in many ways. It really brought attention to areas that may have neglected over the years, maybe health, relationship, and of course, job satisfaction became critical because it's such a big part of our life. And because we spend so much time working from home, many from the living rooms, bedrooms, and the pajamas sometimes, surrounded by pets ones, right? We realize the personal and professional lives meshed into each other more than ever before. So the daily commute was kind of, you roll off the bed and onto the chair sometimes. So we really felt it. So many people realize just how much job satisfaction affects our life outside of work. So the importance of this alignment between work goals and life goals and values is becoming increasingly important. And as we're planning our future, as we're thinking about what we want to do and how we want to apply ourselves, we keep that on the back of our head all the time, right? So that's how we make decisions whether to stay with the company or not,
Yeah.
maybe which job offers to take. Now it becomes a really important part of that. So this topic, in my opinion, is becoming more relevant than ever.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've seen in a lot of my circles where people, if they've been told they have to go back to the office,
Mhm.
they're leaving for a job that is either more flexible or is remote only. Like there's like you said,
Yeah.
people are realizing how much the personal side matters more and the job satisfaction piece. And I think it's a big wake up call for a lot of companies.
Yeah, and now what's interesting is that there are options now, right? So because there are companies that are fully remote. One of my friends' companies, they completely gave up the office, so now everybody's remote. So there are options, and this is great for employees that they can pick something that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
And on that note, I know as I was getting to know you through our conversations, I've noticed how much languages and words mean to you. So you place a lot of importance on what concepts are called. So when we were working on the program together, we had a lot of discussions and we settled on using work life integration rather than just the typical work life balance. And I would love to hear for you to share why was that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Words matter a lot. I've always felt that way. I mean, I grew up with my dad. He's a bit of a linguist by hobby, pretty much. So even just other languages were very common in my household. And even just the English language and how we speak to ourselves is really important, which is a whole other topic. But, for me, the reason why I like work life integration is because I find it's a way more realistic way to approach the concept, right? It really describes reality. Work and life are integrated no matter what. You mentioned that, and we know that it's true. We've seen this a lot in the last 2 years, even more. For some people, there can be more separation between work and personal. For some people, there's less. But regardless of what's going on in your personal life, especially your health, for example, right, that can affect your work life. And the opposite, what's happening at work can affect your personal life and often can affect your health. I mean, just one example comes to mind in terms of during the last number of years when all the schools were closed and all the kids were working or doing school from home. Like a lot of parents had to deal with that. And, that's a very unique situation, but it just highlights how much our work and our personal lives can be intertwined and are intertwined. And I find when we use the term work-life balance, there's a notion of equilibrium or equality, right? Like you think of balance, you think of literally a scale, right? Where it's a scale. Not one side is higher than the other, right? So you're thinking equal time or equal energy is devoted to work and personal. That's not really the case in reality. We know that. And it also, I find this notion of balance, right? It creates an impression of the separation, again, because you're thinking of a scale where there's this side and this side. And again, we know that they're so intertwined. And I want to give some examples of why I think it's almost like a mindset of how you view it, really. And it can really affect you. So for example, if someone is focused on work-life balance, they really want a clear separation between work and between personal. So what happens when you have a personal appointment during your work time, or you have to do a lot of work after hours, right? Sporadic events like that maybe not be a big deal. But if it becomes more frequent, the person is going to feel very frustrated, and they're going to feel like their work-life balance is off, right? And then that just doesn't feel good. And then it just feels like you're struggling to have this balance that just may not exist, right? Whereas if you're of the mindset that you have a work-life integration, where sometimes there's personal things that you have to do during work hours, and sometimes you have to do work during personal hours, and it's fine. However, I want to be very clear that boundaries are still essential on both sides, work and personal. I'm going to chat a little bit more about that in a second, but I want to get your input, Alena, about, I've talked a little bit about the individual component, which is important, right? The individual for themselves needs to create that work-life integration. But I do think there is a place for the company to play a role. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, how can a leader create the right environment to support better work-life integration?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for this question. You know my passion for leadership, and this is it's a really, now the roles of a leader became more important than ever. But I actually wanted to comment on something that you said earlier as you were talking. I really loved the fact that you said, trying to balance work and life, it becomes really, really challenging. And it's almost like if we try to aim for work-life balance, we're setting ourselves up for failure, right? Because it's, trying to hold balance, like that's what comes to my mind with an exercise. When you're trying to balance, it's like the whole body is shaking. You're waiting to fall.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you are aiming for, so when you're
or thinking of the idea of like balancing plates, right? All the spinning plates, and you're trying to balance those. I think a lot of times too, and I often say this to people, is like, sometimes people are trying to live in a fantasy of what they hope something can be. And I often tell people, you have to live in your reality. Like, what is your actual situation? And then live in that and be honest with yourself about what your reality looks like. So you're going to be a lot more happy when you kind of, when you accept the reality, or you understand what the reality is, right? So I was going to say, we have a comment from Anastasia saying work-life integration is a term they've adopted as their firm. Awesome. Let's all start using that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so what can leaders do? Let us know.
So I think there are many, many things that leaders can do, but then we can talk about that for hours. But the first thing that really, really comes to my mind as we talk about this is creating team guidelines. And we all know that in any company, we have a company culture. But in addition to that, we also have micro cultures in every team that are honestly oftentimes much more important, because that's our day-to-day reality. So team guidelines, especially creating them together with your team, is like a doorway into creating that microculture together. And that's really powerful for a few different reasons. So first, it's very challenging to create guidelines that work for everyone at a company level, right? Because different departments have unique circumstances and unique way of working. Like, for example, I remember working in accounting department, and my work looked very different from someone in the HR department or another department, because the last 2 days of every month and the first three business days of every month, now
Yeah.
they were completely different. They were really, we're much busier now if we talk about quarters and projections and all of this. And so now we had some cyclical changes to our work. Now, maybe some teams are client facing. Maybe some teams have rotational roles, or they have to be on, they have to be available at certain times, or 24 hours, and they may have to be responsible for some of that.
Yeah.
Creating guidelines within a team can really help address that. Also, co-creating team guidelines allows to involve the whole team in deciding together how they want to work. And this is very important, because it's not handed out from above, because we all know how much we love when things are given to us and say, hey, go do this.
Yeah.
We don't like that. So
No.
it really allows everybody to be involved, and it takes into account the day-to-day reality of the people who actually do the work. When we're deciding on the rules without understanding the day-to-day challenges, when it's a much higher level, let's say, we run a risk of employees not feeling heard. And as a result, down the line, feeling frustrated because nobody really bothered to look at what my reality is actually. Right? And it gives everyone a chance to address key areas that matter to the team while still thinking about the results we need to achieve as a team. Maybe it's around addressing focus time. So for example, say, every day from 8 to 9, we all have focus time and we don't bother each other. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's addressing the personal time, something you mentioned. What if you have an appointment during the work time? So how can we give you that space, but also maybe send a message to the team that I'm going to be back at this time. So then they have expectations. Maybe it's, what about working after hours? What about email etiquette within the team, right? And we can do that by asking a question. So how can we ensure that we reach our goals as a team in a way that takes into account our needs? But it has to be an ongoing process. It's not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
We are still living in a big experiment. Things are changing. So we need to make sure that we continue revisiting them. And
even just in the sense of people's lives change. So even if you have the same team, sometimes people have younger children, and as their children get older, their needs are different, or if they have older parents, or if they have something personal that happens to them. There's a lot of reasons why, even just within your own team, if it's the same team, circumstances change, and it's always good to revisit things, as well as, have the guidelines. But it sounds to me too, a lot of what you're talking about is flexibility.
Yes.
And that's the name of the game these days, is keeping things flexible for your employees. And I love the idea of co-creating guidelines on the micro level. I think that's really, really brilliant.
And it also takes some pressure off from the leader, right? So now the leader, because leaders are also employees who are also dealing with the same stresses, but now they also have to take care of their team. So when we add the element of co-creation, it takes the pressure off from the leader to having to make decisions for the whole team and thinking about everybody, because the intentions is always there, but they may even lack some information. That's key to creating.
Now, I know we're talking about guidelines, so obviously it's going to be different for every company and for every team, but do you have any tips on how to make the guidelines effective?
Oh yeah, I can think of a few things at least. So one for sure, and then something I mentioned, but it's worth mentioning it again. It's involving everyone. So when you have the discussions around team guidelines, make sure that everybody is present. So if somebody's on vacation, somebody's sick, it's better to postpone that until everyone is there, because by being there, everyone feels heard, and by feeling heard, they're also giving their kind of expressing their commitment to that as well, right? So it's very important. It's also important to keep the maximum of rules or guidelines to maybe 7 or 8 items, because if we have a long scroll of hundreds of rules, it becomes a whole chore. How do I study this, and how do I stay to make sure I follow all of it? So focusing on fewer but key areas is a really, really good start. And then maybe once they become a second nature, you can move on to other rules as well. And another thing that's important is focusing on very specific observable behavior rather than general concepts. So what I mean by that, if we say we want to make sure that we respect each other's time, okay, respecting each other's time, but it may mean completely different things to different people. So what does it mean? Maybe it's, we talk about respect in terms of a meeting place. Maybe it's letting someone finish before before speaking, right? So giving them that space. Maybe it's around, hey, I'm not going to send you emails after 6 p.m.
Mhm.
Maybe that's respecting our time.
Mhm.
And finally, I think it's important to avoid the negatives, because
Mhm.
there's something weird in our brain that happens when we hear the no, we ignore it. It's kind of telling the kids, hey, don't run. So what do
It's
they do?
that it's because your subconscious mind doesn't understand no. It only takes what you say as truth. So if you say the no part, it doesn't hear the no part.
Yeah, my favorite example is, don't think of the elephant, don't think of the elephant. And so what we're
Mm,
thinking is the elephant, right? So it's the
absolutely.
same thing. So instead of saying something, don't be late for meetings, it's, we need to have a rule that's positive. So be on time instead. So I think
Mhm.
those are the main ones.
Yeah, I love it.
And, and I know earlier on you mentioned something, and then we kind of just touched upon that a little bit, the boundaries.
Mhm.
You kind of mentioned that everyone still needs their boundaries. And obviously, creating work-life integration is different for everyone. And, it may look different for different people. But what are some of the steps that employees themselves can take toward
Mhm.
better work-life integration?
Yeah, I absolutely great question. I mean, I'm really happy that you touched on the ways that employers and leaders can help facilitate work-life integration, because I really do believe that that is an important piece, because there is the work piece, right? It's
Mhm.
both. But individuals do need to figure out for themselves what works best. And like you said, everyone is different. So my work life integration is going to look different from yours. And in fact, I know it does, because I know that you've been working some late nights, whereas I put a hard stop on my work day. And in fact, I actually put my phone away at 8:30 p.m. It goes hidden away to sleep. Now, maybe you're okay with lurking later at night. Maybe it's something you're trying to change. Either way, everybody's way of integration is going to look slightly different. And that's totally fine, because we are all different people with different circumstances. Um, again, which is why it's important, like you said, from the work side to have that involvement from everybody in those conversations. The thing with the work life integration that people need to remember is both parts. It's a two-way flow. Work and life both need to have a part. So it can't just, I think a lot of times when we talk about work life balance, work life integration, mostly what it often ends up is that it's just people doing more work, right? So the work encroaches on your personal life. That's not
Yeah.
integration, right? That's just working too much. So this is where boundaries can be helpful. People need to determine, you need to determine for yourself what type of boundaries you need, right? There can be technology boundaries, there can be personal boundaries related to, social media and the kind of things you're intaking. So boundaries can be all sorts of different things. It's something that I get into in one of the workshops in our W squared program. So I don't have, unfortunately, enough time to talk about it today, because I definitely could talk a lot about it. But it can be things, people, it can be how you interact, when you interact, like you were mentioning about, email etiquettes and stuff like that. So some key things to remember, I often get asked in my workshops, how do you get people to respect your boundaries? Great question. The answer is, you need to respect them yourself. So if you
Mm.
set boundaries, stick with them. It can be really hard. I'm not saying that it's easy, but if you don't respect them, why would somebody else, right? It makes sense. Sometimes it can be helpful to tell people you have boundaries. In the case of, for example, the idea of the team guidelines and that sort of thing. Essentially, a bit of what you're talking about is probably some boundaries in there. In other cases, maybe your actions speak enough and you don't need to actually tell somebody. Other than boundaries, although it's somewhat related, some other ways to create better work-life integration. I talk about this for sure in my workshops. Take your lunch, take breaks. So don't just eat lunch at your desk. Take breaks throughout the day. Go outside, do a 5-10 minute walk. Um, you know, again, like I said, the integration part has to include life. It does not
Mhm.
more work. That is not integration. You probably won't be happy with that if it's too much work and not enough life. The idea with the integration is that life is built in. So sometimes it may mean taking a break in the morning, maybe reading a book, or doing, if you're working from home, like doing a load of laundry or doing some tidying or something like that. And again, we have to, I think we're so conditioned, I think a lot of times with that, like work is 9 to 5 and that's work.
Yeah.
I think we need to, it's hard. I'm not saying that it's easy. I struggle with this too all the time. I'm like an I used to be A plus personality. Now I'm like just maybe an A with a little plus. Try,
Still,
right? You know? So I'm constantly reminding myself not to feel guilty about doing personal things or taking time during my lunch to watch like maybe a quick little show on Netflix or YouTube, right? So if you feel guilty, that's normal, but we have to release that guilt little by little because we are working lots. We are often working early mornings or later in the evenings. And again, we need to have the integration. And it's not about the balance where it has to be equal, but you have to be okay with whatever level of equilibrium, right? So I'm thinking, like the mixers, the sound mixers, right? One level is up, one level is here. As long as you're okay with where your levels are, that's fine.
yeah.
You could be working lots. If you feel like whatever amount of life you have is great and you're happy with it, super. Like no one needs to judge you for that. But if you're not happy with where your levels are, that's where you need to take a look at the whole picture and figure out how can you adjust those levels. Some tips for that, again, of course, take your lunch, take your breaks, block that time. A lot of people have a work situation where their colleagues have access to their calendars and colleagues can book time with you. If you have that situation, I really highly encourage you to block time, even if you don't have anything going on. Just block it out, even if you just have personal appointment, whatever. You can absolutely have an appointment with yourself. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, the focus time. Focus time is so important. My God.
I'm sure, right? I'm sure in your working smarter, using neuroscience, we talk about that, right? So blocking time so people can't book meetings with you, or just so that that's time for you to do some deep work. A good exercise, I encourage you, spend the next couple days being self-aware of your energy levels. So how does your energy flow throughout the day? It's not constant. We are not high level energy throughout the whole entire day. Maybe only unless you're like really jacked up on coffee or something, which we could talk about that later. When are you most productive? When are you mostly alert, right? I'm more energized in the morning. So that for me, I know is a better time to do writing or creative things. Afternoons are better for me for like admin type work or, taking a nap. So when you know these things about yourself, it can be helpful for you to plan your day, to block your time. Again, like we talked about, even talk to your colleagues, right? Let them know, hey, my mornings, I need a good 2 hours to do like good chunk of work because that's when I'm going to produce the best quality of work that I can. But you
And that's good. That's good to add to team guidelines. When you talk to your colleagues, it's something
totally.
to, hey, how about we all have this morning or this time to focus?
Or just, even if it's not always the same for everybody, right? Because everyone's different, but at least if you know and you talk about it, right? And again, it comes down to knowing this about yourself. I think a lot of times we go through life not paying attention to the cues that our bodies are giving us. And we need to just learn to tune into that a little bit more and honor what our body is telling us and our energy flows. For me, again, like I've tried so many times to power through things in the afternoon when I know I should just take a nap. Maybe I had a bad sleep the night before or whatever. I've learned now most of the time, if I just take that nap or go on a walk, I will come back and I'll have more energy and I'll be able to get the thing done faster than if I try and push through. I'm not effective. It's just useless, a waste of my time. And I know you talk about productivity a lot in your sessions, so I know you totally understand. I talked about the guilt. I think that's another, I just want to drive that point home again. We need to learn. It's really honestly what we're talking about today a lot is a mindset shift, shifting away from work has to be X time to X time. that is no longer a thing. I just think that that doesn't exist anymore. And we have to just realize that and be okay with it. And the being okay with it definitely means being okay with personal stuff during traditional work hours and learning to not be guilty about it and just go with that sort of flow. And one more point on this. What was I going to say? You might have different periods of days, even where like some days it's going to be more work level, and then the other few days maybe it's more personal level. So you have to look also at like a macro level of your life, not just from a like day-to-day thing, because then it's going to look too disjointed. When you're looking at your life, you're looking at a macro level. And I'm just looking at the time, and we are already at 30 minutes, Alena.
I know. We can.
How did this happen? Okay, we're gonna have. I really want to honor our time. So I think what we're gonna have to do is chat again.
Yeah,
for sure. And also we can share some of our points in posts and through other mechanisms, because I think it's been such a great conversation. I do want you, though, really quick to touch on which I know you were going to talk about, this strength-based approach. I think that that's super important to talk about.
Yeah, the really, it's one of the easiest way to really kind of align the professional and personal goals, because and it's a win-win for leaders and for companies at the same time, right? Because it's something that builds trust, loyalty, and motivation much faster, because it's about understanding your own strengths as a leader. So if you're a leader, and using it as much as possible at work, and doing the same with your team. Because you talked about energy level, right? When we're able to use our strengths, we feel energized by the activity itself. And how wonderful is that, right? So you're kind of generating, we can't expend time, but we can certainly expend our energy. When we are recognized for our strength and seen as experts in something, we feel valued, we feel heard. So again, it adds to that positive feeling. When we get an opportunity to use our strength and to grow in these areas, we see the progress, we develop really, really high levels of expertise. So I think being well-rounded person, it can be very stressful. You're balancing so many different things. But what we need to aim for is creating well-rounded teams where we have unique experts, and then they have complementary strengths and they use together. So there's much more enjoyment, much more engagement, and honestly, much better results.
Yeah, I love that. It kind of reminds me of the sort of do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I don't really fully agree with that statement, but the sentiment of what you're talking about is kind of like that, right? Where when you're working within your strengths, you're gonna just have that energy. You're gonna feel more positive. It's not gonna be as challenging, right? The ease level is going to be better, which means overall, in terms of quality of life, it's gonna be better. I wish we had more time, but I really want that we're honoring.
But if anyone has any questions, please reach out to us. We're happy to continue conversations, talk more about it, and we could also include those questions in the next conversations. We will definitely have.
Yes, for sure. And for anybody who's curious about our W Squared program, we're really keen to help support the development of growth of you and your colleagues. So reach out to either one of us. We'll share more details. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being with us. Thanks, Alena, for taking time out of your day to chat with me. And we'll definitely have to book the next one and set something up soon. Awesome. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.